Welcome everyone today to Super Smart Women's Podcast. I'm Karen Medina, your host, and I'm so glad you're joining us today as we talk with yet another super smart woman. Welcome back to our regular listeners, and if you're new, I'm so glad you're here. I hope you'll subscribe and join us every week where I spend time talking with super smart women. Today I'm talking with Liz Kelz. Liz is the principal at a wonderful elementary school in Fort Worth ISD, Alice Carlson Elementary. And I can say this with absolute conviction because my daughter actually attended Alice Carlson Elementary. But you don't just, roll up to the door and suddenly become principal at this fantastic school. So I'm going to let Liz kind of introduce herself and a little bit of her background and how she ended up in this role as principal.
Well, thank you so much, Karen. I'm very excited to be here. It is Liz Kelz. I actually don't hear my last name very often because, as you know, at Alice Carlson, we all go by our first names. But I grew up in Fort Worth. My parents raised me in Wedgwood. I am a product of Fort Worth ISD schools, and I went to college initially to get my degree in counseling. But first, in order to be a school counselor, you have to be a teacher. And so I went to teach in Diamond Hill, which is an area of Fort Worth, and fell absolutely in love with teaching. I did that for 12 years of my career, along with some instructional leadership and support with math instruction at the campus, and really fell in love with the idea of furthering the support that I can provide by helping teachers support kids as a way to be able to have a bigger impact. And so I went back to school and got my principal certification and landed at North Highmount in Fort Worth ISD. And then from there, COVID took us out. And ironically enough, I found my way to Alice Carlson when there was no one here because I accepted the principalship at Alice Carlson in the middle of 2020. And so I met my school community, I met my staff, and I met the amazing children at Carlson virtually for quite a while that first year.
Until everybody was finally back at school. I know you've had a few predecessors at Alice Carlson and had big shoes to fill, but
yes.
I'm understanding from some of our conversations that great things are still happening at Alice Carlson. So I've recently been taking a course working on my master's in educational administration. And one of them is talking about diversity. And Alice Carlson just came to mind when I was reading some of the different case studies that were discussed in the book because of the unique things that were done at Alice Carlson. So just tell our audience how Alice Carlson, some of the ways that they're different, a little bit about maybe the demographic makeup and how things have kind of changed and evolved over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. I do. I have followed in the footsteps of some incredible leaders. And so I want to make sure to mention that the things that we discussed today are not things that I have carried. They're things or developed. They're things that I've carried on as I've learned about the importance of the aspects of our program model on our students and how they succeed in life. So certainly I stand on the shoulder of giants, but I'm happy to share the work that we continue to do on behalf of them. So when we talk about the diversity of our campus, Carlson is a lotteried-in school, which means that anyone can apply to the campus. There are no academic requirements in that process. You just have to be able to fill out that application before the deadline. And so from there, it is a weighted lottery. And so students are selected first if they have a concurrently enrolled sibling on the campus. And then after that, there's a priorities list that includes the children of district employees. And then after that, it's any child in Fort Worth ISD can attend our school. And so what that means is there potentially could be 26 zip codes represented in our school building, which makes it a very unique place to be because we know that our most segregated communities are our churches and our schools. And here there's an opportunity to create a more diverse community that's enriched with all the different aspects.
Right. Because if it was based on geographic location, Alice Carlson would be pulling from a very affluent demographic or geography based. The campus is like sits right up next to TCU,
right,
and definitely has some of that that purple influence.
Yeah,
There, I think some of the greatest schools in Texas are purple. So,
yeah.
and that's wonderful. But you're right; it does. It pulls from potentially all of those locations. So, just for sake of conversation, what is the current demographic makeup of Alice
Yeah.
Carlson?
While we aim to be more diverse, we're kind of stagnant in our diversity. I pulled data for you looking at 2013 to 2024, and no, just so I could have the accurate numbers. So in 2013, our demographic distribution was 5.7% African American, and today it's 7.1%. So we haven't really moved the needle within that community in terms of attending our school. Our Hispanic population was at 30% in 2013, and we are at 31% now. Our white student population was 59%, and now we're at 57%. And then we have a 5% two or more races community represented at Alice Carlson, which is up from that 2013 from 3.6. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that our community is very much based in word of mouth and legacy members of a family. So if my family goes to this school, I'm going to tell all of my friends and their families to come to this school. And so it's this revolving pipeline of families. So we tend to see our population stay similar because we tend to have the same families attending Carlson year after year.
The lottery makeup tends to be in the same kind of demographic, I guess you would say. Are there any other challenges you think to that? I know when Shelby was there, the busing situation was a little bit of a challenge, but did they implement a kind of a hub and spoke where you could travel from your location? Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so there are opportunities in the district where we have assigned schools that get that are drop off and pick up locations for our campus. The difficulty in that is the amount of time that children have to travel on a bus to get to and from school. And so we do have access to transportation, but the amount of time is sometimes a deterrent for our families. And so that's one of the roadblocks in creating diversity when we're such a centralized school, is how do we create equitable access to get here?
Right. And that obviously in the book, A Single Garment, was one of the challenges that I think all four of the schools that were discussed faced. I know I can remember distinctly 3 of them had a transportation element. And it's one that I know every school that has a focus on equity continues to try and address. So I'm glad to hear that. So talk about some of the initiatives that are in place in Alice Carlson, whether they support diversity or not. I'd really like to talk about some of those initiatives, and then if so, comment on how that has helped to break down some of the diversity barriers.
Yeah. When I initially got that question, I thought right away about the work that my PTA board did when we came back to rebuild a community that had been dismantled due to COVID. And one of those center focuses of our conversation was building a budget for our PTA that would impact access to the different programs and offerings that we were gearing back up to do at Carlson. And so we created a student support budget item line through our PTA. And what that does is it allows our students that are in our 28% economically disadvantaged group to anonymously receive every opportunity and item at Alice Carlson that every child should have access to. So what that means is they all get spirit wear vouchers. They all get to go to shop at the book fair. All of them get signed authors' books when we have the authors visit to Alice Carlson every year. And so what that does is it allows for us to create a sense of everybody being a part of the community, as opposed to those that have access to money to be able to get these different items to be part of it, and then everyone else to feel othered. Because you would be surprised. It would be surprising, I think, to people that aren't in education to know how very much children, even at as early as 5 years old, recognize their difference in their classroom, whether it be racially, racial, ethnicity, culture, and socioeconomics. They really can feel it if they are that marginalized group. And so we try to really break down that wall and that barrier so that everybody's got what they need.
I know for me as a white woman, I hadn't put much thought to this when I was actually teaching until my grandchildren came to live here with me. And my grandchildren are half Hispanic and half American Indian, actually half Cherokee. And seeing the world through their eyes has kind of opened mine up a lot more to some of the things that they say about how they feel, about how other children treat and say, things to them. And I'd never thought of things that way. I know the first time as a teacher, I created an activity that I thought was supposed to be very culturally diverse, or at least agnostic, blew up in my face. It wasn't, and I learned a lot from it, that my assumptions, my unconscious biases, I think is the label we've now put on it, how much they affected me. So tell me, how do you work to create that inclusive environment, and in terms of like faculty, how you help faculty to help students directly in the classroom?
I think one of the biggest things at Carlson that we do is we try to integrate cultural celebrations and identifying cultural connections naturally every day. And we do that through our book studies, and then certainly through our intercultural festival in the spring. And so one of the big emphasis is that we've placed on our book of the month, which is a book that we read. Every classroom receives that book. A staff member writes a letter to all of the readers at Alice Carlson, and then they ask them to respond in some way to the message in the book. But the emphasis on our book of the month has really been about picking diverse books that represent a connection to students in our building. So that
I like that.
Yeah.
Not just a diverse book, but here's a connection.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that.
Yeah. And so we just read the Arabic quilt in our classrooms. And then what was so fun about that is one of the parents came in who can write in Arabic and taught a lesson on how that, and taught the kids about Arabic and how the alphabet was developed, and was able to extend that learning. So making it
so much better a learning experience.
Yeah.
Because of the personal connection, rather than here's how the Arabic alphabet looks, and we pull it up and we look at it on a screen. It's like, let's talk about it. I love that. I absolutely love that. But I interrupted. Was there anything else you were?
Well, and I wonder, one of the biggest things that Carlson has continued to have as a tradition, and I'm sure, I was wondering if your child had the opportunity to develop our intercultural festival. So in the spring, we survey our families for the different makeup of our classrooms. Who is in here? Where are you from? What is your culture and background? And then the students of each classroom vote to study one of the cultures represented in their community. And
I actually don't think that was in place when my daughter was there.
And so,
I love that.
Yeah. And so we bring in some of our competent adult models and our parents. They'll come in and be experts for the school in their learning during that time. And the students will create artifacts about that culture. And then we present them in our Intercultural Festival evening event that is completely designed by our kids to showcase the different communities at Alice Carlson that make up who we are as a family. We have banners that represent every one of our families in our hallways. We took them down 2 years ago because we were fireproofing them, and I think it brought everyone down a little bit. And we were just so eager to get them back up.
I remember Shelby making hers.
Yeah. And so it's a way for us to really lean into the belief that we have that it is our differences that make us so unique and beautiful, but they're worth celebrating.
And not becoming, you used to hear New York as a melting pot. Mm-hmm. And then the language started to change to a mixed salad. And I loved the distinction that, in a melting pot, right, everything kind of blends together and it loses its own identity. But right, in a mixed salad, you can still tell corn from corn and lettuce from lettuce and carrots from carrots. And so that kind of approach to culture recognizes and celebrates all of it rather than it having right, to blend together. And I think Alice Carlson did that beautifully. It's interesting though, when my daughter was at Alice Carlson, we had a Girl Scout troop, and I led that Girl Scout troop with another Alice Carlson mom, Jennifer Strong. Both of her daughters were in the same class with my daughter, and we probably had 25 students that stayed with us all the way up through like 5th grade, and even some beyond that. But we always did the Girl Scouts had a world celebration day. I should remember the exact name of it, but we chose a country every year that we did that, and like immersed into their culture, interviewed with somebody, had artifacts. So it sounds very much like the intercultural fair. So I'm glad that continues for all of Alice Carlson students.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's a wonderful way to learn about other countries. And I love that you have involved the parents. So talk a little bit, because I think that was one of the most magical things about Alice Carlson was the parent involvement and engagement and some of the requirements when you are accepted, because that is unique.
Yeah. I think one of the things that makes Carlson so special is the involvement of our parents in the educational practice of improving our students' learning community and their environment. And so we do ask that every parent or every family at Carlson donate 20 hours worth of service to the school each year. And what that looks like can be very different for every family. And so it's not just your stay-at-home parent that has the opportunity to earn the hours, because they earn them for simply showing up for the things that we want them to be a part of. That includes a fall and a spring parent conference. That includes our intercultural event in the spring and our Mathoween event in the fall, when they come to things like homecoming or our Healthy Lifestyles Expo. When they show up for any event at the school, because we believe that is volunteering. They're giving of their time to be a part of our community and lift their child in it. And then also our students have a portfolio presentation at the end of the year. So they come for that to be able to be a partner in the work that our students do to be celebrated as a learner. And so we ask that they do that volunteering because it is really the foundation of the partnership that we have between school and home. And inviting them in is such a unique thing. I think in educational systems now, it feels almost a little divisive between the educator and the parents. And at Carlson, it is not a thank you for giving us your child at the door and leaving. It's please walk your child into their classroom and talk to their teacher and say good morning and be a part of it with us. So we're always asking them to come in as opposed to pushing
Which
them.
is different in this era of school security.
Correct.
Because
that is correct.
When Shelby was there, a lot of those security initiatives had not yet been put into place. So it was easy to pull up in the back, whether you had the reserve spot at the, the pole position or had to come all the way across the parking lot. I did buy that one year. There was some niceness to that. But you just could come right in and see the teacher every day. How did you get past some of those security, or how have you adapted the security protocols in order for that to be safe, but yet be a practice that y'all been able to continue?
Yeah. So in terms of morning drop off, I know a lot of schools let parents drop the first 2 weeks of school, and then they stop allowing them into the building. And we continue that practice all year long with the absolute necessity to have myself and my school counselor at that door. So we man that door and monitor every single person that comes in every single day of the week. The beauty,
and after doing that the first 2 weeks of school, you know who those people are.
We sure do. And that's the thing. It's beautiful because we are a small community. And so we know all of our families. There's not a stranger that walks in our door. Because we know who every single parent is. Funny enough, I had a dad come a few weeks ago, and I did not recognize him, and I did not let him in the door initially because his wife had already walked in with their daughter, and he did not have a child with him. So if you're going to open up your community to be welcomed in, you have to set up those safety measures and stick to them. And in terms of just coming to volunteer, our parents have to go to our call boxes. They have to identify who they are and the reason for their visit. They aren't allowed to go straight to classrooms. I know that that's kind of a practice that has gone away at Carlson because of safety. They have to check in at the office. They have to follow the check-in protocols, and then they can go about their day. But a lot of our volunteers during the school day are repeat volunteers, and so we've already got them in our system. We already know who they are, and so we're ready to welcome and receive them.
I know that one of the traditions Alice Carlson has had is if you were an Alice Carlson student and it's the year that you're graduating, they come back and they have the senior walk.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm getting choked up. I think my daughter had maybe 70% of her class came back. Her kindergarten class went through school and then came back. I think the only ones that weren't there truly had a schedule conflict or had moved so far away they weren't able to come back. And I think that that's extremely unusual in a school that they didn't start in kindergarten, go all the way through 12th grade. I mean, Fort Worth ISD is pretty large. I mean, for the audience that isn't familiar with Fort Worth ISD, can you give a little bit of how many high schools and what's your average enrollment at an elementary versus what it is at Alice Carlson? Can you shed some light on just some of that demographic?
Yeah. So, I mean, we have about 70,000 students in Fort Worth ISD. We are unfortunately, a declining enrollment era in education in public schools, and in Fort Worth ISD, we're being impacted as well. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head of how many elementary schools there are, but just in my area, under my pyramid, which is the north region of Fort Worth, we have, I think there's 16 elementary campuses under my director. And so, we have a ton of schools in Fort Worth. Several of them are smaller now. They have less enrollment, but typically you're talking about 500, before we were seeing decline enrollment, we were seeing 500, 600 kids in a school building. Carlson is not built to hold that capacity. We only have up to 396 students. That's 3 classrooms per grade level, K through 5. And so I think the beauty of having all of your daughter's friends come back is because the memories that people share about their experience at Carlson are such that they want to come back and visit this space because they're just beautiful memories. We're at a phase in Carlson's history as we opened in 92 as an applied learning center where our applied learning students have now become our applied learning parents. And they're partnering with us and sharing the message about the power of our program as the models for it. So it's just a beautiful thing.
And all of those get back to Carlson through that lottery system. If they don't have other children already there. They don't have siblings. They do this lottery, and there's quite a few that end up on a waiting list. In
Right.
fact, we were on a waiting list for Shelby, and we got the message that, hey, we didn't get in, but we were pretty high up on the waiting list. And so there was this disappointment, and then yet this like, oh, but there's still a chance.
Right.
It truly feels like you've won the lottery when you get a chance to go to Carlson, and it was a beautiful experience for my daughter on so many levels. She's now actually in her junior year at West Texas A&M, going into nursing. Her older brother, also a college graduate, working in the Fort Worth area. And I think that foundationally, without a really good elementary program, getting you started off well and loving education, because it's more than just I learned, it's I love to learn.
Right.
And I think that was part of what was instilled at Alice Carlson. I think part of that came from the tradition that Alice Carlson has, where you mentioned you're not, Miss Kelz at school. You are Liz. Her Shelby's kindergarten teacher was Randy. In fact, I don't even think I could say her last name off the top of my head because she was Randy.
Right.
Talk about that. And because I at first was kind of opposed to that. That didn't sit well with how I was brought up in education, and how was that going to be? How were kids going to respect teachers? But shed some light on that.
Yeah. It was a practice before I came to Carlson. I actually did a tour today for families that did get into the lottery to come and visit the school. And it was one of the first things they picked up on was, hey, Liz, and hey, Randy, hey, Sarah, naming all of the adults that were walking around by first name, and the students doing that too. But really what it is it's about teaching our kids that we're all equal partners in the learning experience. And so when you're sitting in a classroom or you're sitting in my office solving a problem with me, I'm part of that process. I'm a learner too, and we have equal parts things to contribute to the thing that we're working on or the space that we're in. And so sometimes labels build walls. And so what we would like to do is ensure that our students know that we're learners alongside them. We're the models for them.
Well, that's going to be true when they leave school. Now, it might not be true where they end up in middle school or high school,
right?
But and maybe not in at a collegiate level education. However, when you get out into the business world, you don't address your colleagues as Mr. and Mrs.
Right.
They are your counterparts in that work process. So I think the respect that built based on mutual respect and not based on I'm higher than you. It's, I have this role to play and you have this role to play, and we're going to learn together, and we're going to learn to mutually respect each other. And the teacher models that respect. And they can do that without having to have that title in front of them. So it was a huge change for me. Yeah. I wanted to call Jeannie. I wanted to call her Miss Robinson, and I kept having to go, no, she's Jeannie. She's Jeannie. And then when I actually started teaching high school again after that, I was like, I just want the kids to call me Karen. I don't really want them to use my last name. However, that was not the practice at that school. I'm still trying to convince principals as I come across them of what a great practice this is. But it is definitely a culture shift.
Yeah, it is.
But one that I loved at Alice
Carlson.
One
that I didn't have as a teacher or an assistant principal. And so when I came to Carlson, it was one of the first things I picked up on, and I saw the instant value of it as I was meeting my communities virtually. Because it's one thing to sit in a Zoom window with uncertainty about schools opening and say, hi, my name is Miss Kelz. But to say, hi, my name is Liz, it instantly forms relationship.
A bond, right? And that speaks not only to the relationship with the students, but the relationship with the parents.
Absolutely.
In the community, and the relationship with the teachers. So I think that is definitely an initiative that I don't know who was the brainchild behind that. It might have been Jeannie.
Probably. Well, maybe. She's
a giant. We'll give credit to until we find out differently. But she modeled it well.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the other big challenges that you feel maybe Alice Carlson or schools in general face fostering diversity, equity, inclusion? DEI has almost become this bad word in the current political culture, but I don't believe it's a bad concept.
Yeah.
And I think we have to always be thinking about inclusion. You can from diversity, from equity. Everybody needs to feel and be valued. What's the biggest challenge in creating that culture at Alice Carlson?
Well, one is the access. So we've talked a little bit about the bus issue. So giving our community, Fort Worth community, 26 zip codes, the access to get to our campus is a huge issue. With the bus limitations and driver shortages and all of the things that are going on right now nationally in education. So that's one thing. I think the other thing is making sure that we communicate about our program really well. Because if you don't know about our school, if you don't know about applied learning, if you don't know about our intercession calendar and our interest clusters and all of these things that make our school so unique, it becomes an intimidation. And so we push out so much information about our school when we're gearing up for application season, because we want everyone to know and feel comfortable with applying to come to a school that is not in their neighborhood. And we have an interest night that is developed. The scripts and the tours are developed all by Carlson students. We have so that the students that are going to potentially be part of our family they feel comfortable. And then
I do remember the tour that we took.
Yeah,
we were led around by a student, not by an administrator or a teacher.
Yep, absolutely. Still practice today. And so I think it's a challenge to get the information out about our community to lower any kind of reservation to take the chance to give us a try. If you're not already familiar with our school, and because our demographics haven't really changed over the course of 10 years, we know that it's staying within the same communities, and we have problem solved as a staff. We probably should pitch it to our students to try to solve
the problem.
I just kind of thought about that as we were talking, plant the seed for them, is how do we really get our name out there to the wider community so that they feel comfortable with the potential.
I mean, you can't really go into the other elementary schools and recruit.
Right.
And most people that come into Carlson come in at that kindergarten level. So how do you reach them before without creating a combative situation with the elementary? Because the students that come to Alice Carlson, varying socioeconomic status, however, they do have a family that's focused on learning.
Right.
I think a lot of the students, they come there because their parents filled out a lottery application. Why did a parent fill out a lottery application? Because somewhere along the lines, someone told them about Alice Carlson and how phenomenal the education is that they get. So if they don't have that whisper, and it's not in a community where they're being reached, how to do that. Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I think that you should create a focus group of students from different areas and let them brainstorm your solution. I bet you'll find some amazing ideas.
Absolutely. I mean, you give them a seed, and they will run with it. We truly believe that. And I learned that through being an observer at Carlson. I didn't applied learning campus. I didn't teach at an applied learning school. I did not lead at an applied learning school. So when I came to Carlson, a large part of what I did was ask a lot of questions of my staff and make mistakes. I would make decisions where I would put them on committees, and all of a sudden one of them would say, Liz, no, we choose. We decide the committees that we want to be on. We have the autonomy of choice here. And as I became more and more involved within applied learning as our pedagogy, I just fell in love with it so much. And I want diverse communities to be able to have access to our model. And if they can't, if the issue is access to the school building, then how can we build our model out into other communities?
Absolutely. So I know that there's some other student level initiatives. You mentioned forming a committee. There are some things that you already do at the student level that I think are wonderful for inclusion. Can you talk about some of the student led programs that you have?
So we have our news crew. So news crew meets with me. That's my service club on Fridays. We develop out our daily announcements. So our students run our announcements every morning. They also develop our tour scripts, and they are in charge of family tours. We have our PAC, which was new last year, and that's our peer assisting coyotes. They are older buddies that go into different classrooms that help the students in that classroom in the morning as they're getting ready to start their learning for the day. And so really it creates a bond between our olders and our smaller students. We do have our field day leaders, our fifth graders who lead a team of K through fifth grade students on field day. So we have mixed level groups building community and identifying with each other in a way that's not typical, because typically you only know the children in your grade level. And so it's that sense of everyone is a family here. And so we know everyone. We try to intentionally build that knowing of others and other grade levels. We also have our conflict managers. So that's a group of students that work together to help others solve problems. Obviously, we have adults that oversee the work that they do to ensure that they're helping them solve problems that are appropriate for children to be aiding with. And then we as the adults do a lot of work in helping students identify the difference between a problem that they definitely need to solve and then one that we should be in charge of solving.
And the conflict managers were there when my daughter was there, and I actually had 3 conflict managers that were members of my Girl Scout troop. And they actually took the skills that they were learning and used those skills when we actually moved from, it wasn't just Alice Carlson. We were in 6th grade, and some of the students that then joined the troop were not Alice Carlson students. They'd come from other schools. And the conflict managers were phenomenal at handling any situations that rose out of this is the way we've always done it, and this is the way they've always done it, and they could sit down. So teaching and working with those students to learn at such an early age how to manage conflict. I would love to see a survey, and you probably have this on. I would love to see a survey of where Alice Carlson graduates have ended up, that have graduated and are beyond college level, or are actually in their careers, where they actually ended or have landed currently in their careers.
Right.
And what that they remember from their Alice Carlson experience that helps them in their current careers. I would love to see
I would love that information too. We've talked about that as a staff, as needing to provide that as a point of data
recruiting material.
Yeah, I mean, truly and honestly, but also it would serve as an affirmation that the work that we do in applied learning, it works beyond the years that a child is with us, because it does. And we have evidence of that in our staff members who have adult children who came through Alice Carlson, who are leaders in their own industries because they learn through applied learning how to be a self-advocate, how to express and communicate their strengths well, and how to work collaboratively and problem solve with a team. The whole purpose of our school is to teach children those soft skills that are going to make them competent adults. That's why we don't make them call us Mr. and Mrs. That's why we don't make them walk down the hallway with their hands behind their back and a bubble in their mouth. I joke, but I mean it. The only place that walking in a straight line silently will serve a person as an adult would be in a prison. And
maybe the military, but
military, prison. But in terms of a learning environment, we don't see the value in it. It doesn't yield any success for them that they can't just learn if they're going in the military, learn because they're in, a particular program in the middle and high
Right.
school to teach them those competencies. So that being said, I mean, it just I did a tour a few weeks ago with a lady that reached out to me expressing how much Jeannie had an impact on her life. Jeannie was her fourth grade teacher before she was the principal at Alice Carlson. And she wanted to come back and see the building. And so I offered to have her come. Her kid's not going to be in school next year, but to come and see it and join one of our families on a tour. And the entire time, each time I kind of leaned into her and asked her, could you speak about your experience? She kept saying over and over again that it was the lessons that she was taught from our school in terms of having a voice, that she has things to say. Katie, you have things to say, that she heard Janice say to her, is what empowered her in her decision and her career, her life decision, her career decisions. And so that's a complete blessing to be able to receive that from different people, especially because I didn't start this school. I was passed the baton, and it is that work of the originals that came before us that are still impacting our Fort Worth community today. I mean, these people live in Fort Worth.
Absolutely. That's interesting that you got that perspective. I would say after we left Alice Carlson and ended up in schools in Weatherford, and then back in Fort Worth area in Benbrook for a little while, and then ultimately she graduated from a little tiny school out here west of Fort Worth, west of Stephenville, Huckabee. And it's a 1A school, and there were 14 kids in her graduating class.
Oh, wow.
But she dropped into that school at the 11th grade, time frame. And so you don't go to a new school in 11th grade and have the success I think that Shelby did have. She ended up, officer in the National Honor Society, student council, FFA. I mean, she was just well-rounded and fell into that. I'll give her personality, a good part of that credit, but the skills that she gained in being able to speak up with confidence, to identify problems, to be part of a solution, to all of that she gained at Alice Carlson. Academically, she has never needed my assistance to the extent that I know other parents have had their students rely on them, because she was taught how to take an initial problem and to build a solution and a presentation and do that with confidence through the work done at Alice Carlson and the applied learning programs. So well, we could probably go on and talk forever, but I just want to wrap up with a couple of general questions that I like to ask everybody on the podcast. You've had quite a few years now in education. What is some of the best advice you've ever received?
So I think that when I transitioned from being a teacher into being a leader, you sometimes have this misconception that you're supposed to be the person with all the answers, right? You're the leader. And the best advice that my mentor principal gave me, Dr. Myrna Blanchard, was you got to be the person that says, let's go, and not the person that says go. And telling others what to do and how to do it. And I think Carlson is a really great example of that, because we're all doing the work together. And so it's really benefited me, the continuing reminder that we're going together. We're not operating at the top because we're the boss.
Right. That you have your roles and responsibilities, and the teachers have theirs. And I've always thought as a leader in business that my role was to equip those that worked under my leadership to do their jobs really well. That my main purpose was to create a vision and to remove barriers.
Right.
And if I could do that, then I could consider what I was doing successful. So I absolutely love that. Let's go. I can hear one of our foreign exchange students that we had here from Spain. That was her phrase. It's like, let's go. And it was always, because you're going with me. I'm not doing this alone. So
And it's also the idea of checking in with one another. Are we all going in the same direction that we agree on? Are we all feeling like we're valued members of this journey together?
Exactly.
I think, educating children is a difficult job. And so we've got to build a community of adults that enjoy and being with one another and support the work that each of us do and honor that and feel valued in it. I'm a type A personality. I have a very strong opinion on things, but man, sometimes in those quiet moments, you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm doing. Do I know what I'm doing? Yeah. So that's really maybe what I want to send the message to your listeners is like, be a person that's okay with being vulnerable about feeling like you don't know it all the time when you're in leadership, because you don't have to know it all the time. And you don't have to fake it till you make it. We can be vulnerable about it as long as we have good leaders standing next to us to support us, other women around us, right?
So talk about books and influencers that you've had along the way. And while you're saying that, I'm going to pull a book off my shelf. I'm going to show it to you.
Sure. We were talking a little bit about, the idea that it is a leader's responsibility to build a culturally responsive community and how we do that well, right? And so it made me think about Zaretta Hammond wrote a book, and it was titled Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain. But one of the things in that book that stood out the most to me, that was so powerful, and the reason why I'm mentioning it, is the idea of a warm demander. And so a warm demander is a teacher, an educator, a leader in a school that's truly an educational advocate for all students, because they have a warm affinity to the children. They have a relationship built of trust, but then they demand that child meet their educational potential by continuing to push them, by continuing to remove the barriers in their way with them when they can, by continuing to foster relationships with parents to be able to support and network. And so when I was thinking about Carlson and thinking about really impactful books, I really thought about the warm demanders that create competencies within teachers to be culturally responsive in their classrooms.
Well, I will definitely put a link to that book in the description. This is the book I was going to show you.
Oh.
So this book was when we did our enrichment group. I led the students through creating this, the ABCs of Alice Carlson, and they did all the photography. They did, like you probably have this in your library.
We do. In our we have a history section, an Alice Carlson history section in our library with a lot of artifacts from 92 and before 92, actually.
I mean, they laid it out. They chose all the things that stood for the different letters, that when it was their page, they got to put their pictures on that page. And I mean, down at the bottom, like, it actually reads like U is for umbrella, and they wrote all of the text. It was so neat to see them, put that together and to brainstorm, what's my letter, what different words. And this was a kindergarten class.
That's amazing.
So I actually keep it in a plastic cover, and it stays on my shelf
that's so beautiful.
As that reminder of that experience I got to have with those kids. Liz, thank you so much for joining me today. As I wrap this up, any last advice, anything you would want a listener to walk away with, someone that may be thinking about going into education, because a lot of the listeners for Super Smart Women are college age, looking for women that kind of mentor them and encourage them. What would you tell a young woman?
I guess for people just starting out and potentially seeking a career in education, I think that one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself is a career that you find so much value in your personal life by doing. And so it's hard work, but it is most certainly the right work. We need educators. We need smart women in our schools. We need them teaching in our classrooms and leading our buildings. And so I encourage you, if you're looking for a career that's going to be both professionally fulfilling, but also personally hard work, education is the place to be. Yeah.
Absolutely agree. One of my favorite people of all times was a teacher that I had in fifth and sixth grade.
Yeah.
We stayed in touch. She came to all of our class reunions. I actually attended her funeral along with many other students.
Yeah.
And I think that if you can have that kind of legacy,
Yeah.
that there are people that come back to see you because of who you were as a teacher for them when you were
Yeah.
a little bitty. That's there's no greater calling or career that I think
Agree.
anyone can have. I'll give the health profession, the nurses, their
Oh,
credit, because my
absolutely.
daughter's going to be one of those. But someone that helps you heal or someone that helps you learn, I think are maybe the two greatest callings anyone could have.
I agree.
Again, thank you so much, Liz. Thank you
Yay.
to our audience for joining us. If you haven't, please subscribe to our podcast and be sure to plan and join us each week as I talk with more super smart women.